Welcome to the Church of Truth. We want everyone to know how the Lord has been blessing.
Yes.
Yes.
All of us here have experienced the spiritual world and how the Lord has blessed us, either experiencing from how the Lord was dealing with us regarding ourselves, or from Brother Miller, which is Elder Miller, which is the senior pastor of the Church of Truth. And the Lord has found this season to be the season for us to share with everyone how the Lord is blessing. That we can experience Him here in this present world. So, Brandon, is there an experience that you have on your spirit that you would like to share?
Amen. While I was sitting here thinking, the Lord brought back the very first experience I had. I was actually with Elder Miller. I can't remember if we were coming from Bible study or Sunday service, but I know we were driving. We left the store over where he used to live at, and we were heading to his house, his apartment that he had at the time. And I remember when we were driving there, I started to hear sounds of water, and I started to feel wind. Now, I had been going to the church a couple of months, not a whole year, it was about a couple of months, and I had the teachings of heaven and hell and true Christian religion that the Lord had him to teach and is still teaching. And what I was experiencing, I didn't know was in the teachings because I hadn't got to that part yet. So as we were driving over, I could just hear like water pouring and this wind, and I don't know what is happening. Like, I had never experienced that before in my life, and I can feel it while I'm driving. So it's kind of bringing a fear because I can't stop it from happening. Like, it's beyond me. So as we're driving, he looks at me and he's like, okay. And he knows what's happening, but I don't know. So we're driving and we pull up at the house, and he goes inside and just leaves me in the car because I could not drive. I wouldn't have been able to drive because I was transitioning out of my body while I was driving. So as we were pulling up, parked the car, the Lord told him to go inside and just leave me there for a minute. So as I was sitting there, it kept getting louder and louder, and the next thing I know, I'm out of my body and I'm in the spirit. And I remember seeing myself. You know, I seen myself. I was looking at myself, and I was in heaven, but I was still physically in the vehicle. You know, and awake. I wasn't asleep. I was still alive. You know, but I was seeing heaven. And I remember when I was moving, the way you move is so, it's quick. Like the way you travel in this world, you know, it takes a long time to get from here out to the parking lot. But in the spirit, it's much different. And I noticed that I was moving a lot quicker. Like, it's hard to put into words, you know. So I remember moving, and it's just like I was just going like from one place to the next. And I remember seeing the trees and the sun, how vivid and bright the sun was. And you could just tell it was the light of heaven. And I didn't know that it represented anything about the Lord because it was my first real experience like this before ever. So as I was walking, now before that happened, thank you, Lord, I came to a gate. And at the gate, there was people that was greeting me before I went into the gate. And I looked to the left, and here's Elder Miller. So, but in my mind, you know, I wasn't thinking that I had left the body because all I could focus on was what was happening now. You know, and it was so real. I know it was real because I experienced being there. And he came up to me and he greeted me, and as I was going in, and I remember seeing a lady that had real long red hair, and I was being greeted by all these different people. They were different races, and they were smiling as I was going into this big gold gate. And they were all smiling, and I'm going in, and the gates opened up, and then I just started to travel. And I remember seeing the city And the city was just gold, you know, and I understand now that it was the celestial heaven that the Lord had allowed me to experience. Now, I didn't see any people at the time, but I seen the city. And I remember traveling and seeing how gold, it was a cathedral. And it was so gold and so grand and so beautiful, and just how awesome it was, and how quick you travel from one place to. I wish I could really put into words the travel. Like, you really can't, because it's not the same plane. It's a whole different plane.
It's not in space and time.
It's not in space and time. So you're not physically walking anywhere. Your spirit is moving from here to there. But then the next thing that happened, it started to get really dark. And it got real dark. And I heard the Lord tell me that I was in hell. And as it got dark, I started to see another church. And it was a very big church, and it was black, really dark. And it had real small windows with just like a little light in them, but it was so small. And I remember seeing there was a man that was standing in a trench coat, and he had his back to me, and there was some kind of beastly looking creature, and his eyes was glowing, and it was looking at me. And later on I learned that was my old man, that represented me, and I wasn't able to see myself at that time because I was new coming in. I was not able to really understand what I was going to have to come out of, the sin that I was going to have to lay aside. But I remember seeing this small church, and then the next thing I remember is slowly coming back out of the spirit. And it was I had to get used to being back in the physical plane, in the physical realm. So it wasn't like a boom and I was out of it. I had to adjust. And it took some time to where, you know, I sat there for a while, and, you know, I just kind of moved back and forth kind of slow. And to my body and to my spirit, you know, came back into this natural world. And then I had came out.
Did your body seem like it was heavy?
It did seem like a weight. It did, because when I think back when I was in heaven, it didn't feel like all of this weight that we have. You know, gravity pulls everything down. You don't feel that. I felt light and quick. But when I came back into my body, I was weighed down, and I had to adjust, and I was moving slow until I finally came to. And then I was, the Lord had me to tell Elder Miller what happened. And he said, you know, this in the teachings. And I was thinking, what? I did not know. He said, yeah, it's in the teachings. So I'm like, I got to get in this, you know, but it made me feel like I wasn't crazy. Because things like that, you'd be afraid to tell people because they'll look at me like I'm crazy, I think this and think that. But I knew I could trust him. And because he was the pastor and the way he was living, I knew if he was saying it, it was true. And to know that it was actually in the teachings of Emmanuel Swedenborg, Heaven and Hell, that this is actually wrote about, what I experienced is actually happening, and I'm not dead, but I'm experiencing it. So that's just what the Lord brought back to my remembrance that I thought was awesome.
You know, that's really awesome because Brother Miller is sharing openly how he was caught up out of his body. And, you know, you really don't really understand. Well, I didn't understand it until it was so repetitive and how the Lord had to open my spirit. And as you were speaking, I thought about the experience that Desiree had, because many people would like to know, do they see their loved ones after they leave this world? So Desiree, would you like to share with us?
Yes. Amen. It's something, because that was actually what was in my spirit as you were speaking. And I remember one of the times that I saw one of my loved ones. I just remember going out in the spirit at the time. I had just graduated from college and, you know, just came home shortly after that. And I remember going out in the spirit, and where we was at the time, we was actually having church in one of the apartments, at my mother's apartment, as a matter of fact. And when I went out in the spirit, all I can remember is something very similar. It just became very peaceful. And so I remember like going through meadows, and it was just so greenery, but the greenery was alive.
Yes.
Like it was like all the plants were actually alive. And then I remember walking, and then I remember going past a beautiful waterfall. And when I was young, I used to dream of waterfalls, and at the time I never actually been to a waterfall. And so the waterfall was just so magnificent. It was beautiful. I'm talking about the colors and everything of it was so rich. And so I remember going through this waterfall, and just everything of it was just so beautiful. And then of course, I was feeling light and I was feeling free. And as I continued to walk too, I actually came to a room. And in this room, I actually saw my uncle. And my uncle at that time, he had been deceased for a few years at that time. But when I saw him, and before he was deceased, he was like without hair and things like that. And so when I saw him, he had hair and he looked young. And he was telling me how he was being taught. And the room that he was in, it looked like a classroom. But the classroom was bright. Like it was extremely bright in the classroom. It was just like, it was a white, but it was magnified. Like almost like a white with a glow almost. And he was sitting there, and he said that he was being taught. And there were people on each side of him. And so he had, was just telling me about his experience. And from him telling me about his experience, he actually told me something that at the time I didn't understand. He actually told me, he said that there was a time where I was really calling out to the Lord. There was a time where I had been kidnapped and I was really lost. And I was so glad because he was the one that actually found me. And so at that time he told me that the Lord said that I was a remnant. And at that time I was like, I don't even know what a remnant is. And so I remember he said, he let me know that I was still on this earth for a reason, that I am a remnant and I'm part of this new church. And so from then, when I got out of the spirit, I asked Elder Miller, what's a remnant? And then from there, he was able to break it down to me. And of course, I told them all about my vision, but it's an experience that I would never forget and I will always treasure.
It was so peaceful and so joyous that you really didn't want to come back.
Oh, I didn't. You're right. It's true. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you said it. I did ask him. I was like, can I stay here? And he let me know that I had to go back, and that's when he told me that I was ready.
Amen. It's really something because how Brother Brandon was talking about that he experienced heaven, but then he also experienced hell. And so, Marcus, have you experienced that darkness?
Oh, yes. I've definitely experienced that darkness. Being around Elder Miller and how he has the presence of the Lord just constantly emanating from him. When he prays for you, then it just it leaves a space for the Lord to move and to come in and to minister and to take you places. And I was so used to, at that time, the Lord taking me to such beautiful, wonderful places what everybody's explaining. And I remember that time really seeking the Lord, and I was like, Lord, I want you to show me who I really am. Oh, Lord. I don't know why I asked that. I said, Lord, I want you to show me, the things I don't want to see. And Elder Miller had already prayed for me, and I'd seen wonderful things. And then I got up and I said that, and he came to pray for me a second time. And he doesn't always come to pray for you a second time. Right. He came back to pray for me, and I was like, yes, Lord, I want to receive it. And so when I went out in the spirit, oh, Lord. So I was walking, and at first what I was seeing, I would see this, like I saw this table, and it was made with food. And then the food looked a mess, and I was like, what's going on? How did that food just change? Then I saw these pillars, and they were nice and gold, then they turned stone, and I said, what is going on? Everything that I looked at would switch, and I said, Lord, where am I at? I don't know if I'm in heaven, I don't know if I'm in hell. Things keep switching, and he said, your perception is off. He said, you can't experience heaven right now because your perception is off. And as he showed me that, he continued to take me more inward into my spirit. I first started, I seen like this big spider-like creature. And there were like a man and woman. And they were literally like called man and woman. And that's all I can remember is hearing that in my spirit. Man and woman. And they were just like enwebbed in this spider-like creature. And then I seen this woman. And she was playing these wicked tricks. And it was on purpose. It was to torment me. And she was singing at first. And I loved to sing, but I couldn't hear her. But she was singing. And then her whole face ripped in half, like the jawbone separated from the rest of her face. And I was like, oh, Lord, I got to get up out of here. You know? I was like, this is too much. And I felt that she was doing that on purpose. And then as I just continued to go more and more deep, I found myself in this cave-like place. And when I say the feeling there was even worse than what I could see, because there was this evil spirit in the distance laughing at me. And it was like the Lord had this guide with me, like to take me through, to protect. I now know it's to protect me. But I just remember this guide being with me, telling me to come on. And I felt so cut off from the Lord, it literally felt like something was pressuring me, just like pushing me down into nothing. I could not breathe. I could not, like I had no connection to life. I felt so empty. I felt lost. I was afraid. I felt like doom. I felt like it was all over. And then there was no way back. And so when I felt that cut off, I threw a temper tantrum. I fell right there in the middle of hell, and I started kicking and screaming, I don't want to get out of here. I don't want to get out of here. And then I was just losing it like that was going to make a difference. And that spirit was just laughing even harder. And I seen this opening, and I said, oh, there I go. Me thinking. And so I got up, and I ran into that little opening. And then there was these big-headed creatures. And they were eating on these oily fish scales. And they was like very black oil, and it was like going in and out of their mouth, and these long teeth, and then in and just slimy falling out of their mouth. And I was like, Lord, I got to get out of here. You know, I just kept praying to get out, to get out, to get out, because I cannot explain that feeling of being cut off from life. Cut off. Just cut off. And I felt like I was suffocating, and I was asking the Lord to get out. And so I remember coming back into my body, and it felt like it happened so quickly, because it was like, like this air, like this gasp of air came into me. And I remember getting up and I remember Sister Nita was just kind of looking at me like, and I just ran to Elder Miller, and I was just crying. I can't remember what I was saying. All I knew is that, one, that is not the place for me. Right. I had concluded that, because before then, I have to be honest, I was in a mindset where I thought I could handle hell. Right. Well, if I go to hell, I just go to hell. I was really like that. Right. And so when I experienced that, I knew it was the mercy of God, because that's what I needed to realize I could not handle hell, that I'm not bigger than hell. I can't handle that. And I went to Elder Miller. I was just crying, and he just helped me. He was like, I know. He just said, I know, because he knew what I had experienced. He knew what the Lord had shown me. Right. He knew what state that I was in. So it was like the Lord embracing me. And I just thank God for that experience, because not only do I not want to go there, I don't want that for what people say, my worst enemy. I don't want that for anybody. But I know that experience was real. I wasn't just having, people just say a vision. I was there. Yeah. I was in hell. Yes. And the Lord blessed me to come back, because I knew if I would have left at the time, that would have been my community. That just would have been where I was.
Amen. And I remember, and hopefully I'm remembering correctly, whereas when God was taking you through, when you was throwing the temper tantrums, and how the Lord was telling you, you said you wanted to see.
Yeah, he did. He continued to minister to me.
You said you wanted to see.
Yeah.
So he had to encourage you to see, because how the Lord wants us to freely choose where we're going to spend eternity. So he has to show us heaven as well as hell. And Brother Ron, did you experience something not exactly like that, but did you experience where you were in hell?
Amen, Mother Jane. Wasn't going to share that one tonight.
Oh, God is good.
Yeah. First thing I did want to say is that as we were starting, I did see Elder Miller there in the center with fire around him.
Yes.
And I saw him with a feather in his hand, a writing feather, and he started just such gentleness to start to write.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Lord.
Amen, amen.
So, at the lowest point in my life, the Lord did show me hell, and it was a nasty thing, and never would want to, like Brother Mark is talking about, wish that upon my enemies. It was just, I remember it was, just to put it all out there, it was a horrible red. It was a low point in my life, and I couldn't leave my house. I was stuck at my house. Anxiety, and I had quit my job as a minister. I was just coming into the teaching of Elder Miller, but I was still in Manhattan, and the Lord decided to show me, my state, and this horrible red was everywhere around me, and I was pushing between just bad. There was bad people, and I was being pushed between it, and just into this place, and then I came out in this room. And it was a room with all my sins in there, and it was something. I'll just put them out there. It was computers, which I had spent a lot of time with. It was a warm bath where it was just, I could feel that lust for, just that external. Hiding from the world, where I would lust as a little kid was in the bathtub, and just feeling, and a mirror was there to look at myself, my vanity, and there was food there. There was food. There was a lot of just my lust for food, and there was, and I don't know if I need to share it just because the Lord has told me that my brother Jason is being taught on the other side, and that he is, and I believe it, that he's making heaven. But Lord showed me a state that we both shared together that he was in, because he was in the next room with prostitutes, and I knew he was there, and I had dreams where he was telling me, don't do what I did, because there was a room prepared for me, and there was a room that he was in, and it was something that he needed to come out of. I'm learning later, but it was horrifying to think my brother was there in that room, and the door was shut, so I wasn't allowed in there. And I remember looking in the mirror. I couldn't feel any pleasure in my vanity. I remember wanting to play on the computers, but feeling no pleasure in it, because it was just such a horrible. It was just so disconnected from the Lord. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it because I couldn't enjoy my evil. It was just. I was experiencing evil how it was. It was like all the phoniness torn away, and just experiencing evil for what it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't pleasurable.
Right.
It wasn't pleasurable. It was torture because I couldn't have what I wanted in that. The Lord was showing me in that it was just a state of utter horror and just emptiness. Just emptiness. I did not want to be there, and I'm just so blessed that the Lord brought me out of that. That wasn't my final state. And knowing how much work that I've had to do to come out of that state, it's just been a blessing. And thank you for asking me to share that.
Before coming to the Church of Truth, I would have thought that, oh my God, that means that the Lord hates me. But no, that's Him loving me. Because He's showing me this is not the plan that I have for you.
Amen.
I have much better for you, but this is the state I have to bring you up out of. And that's a love. That's a love. Whereas, we oftentimes we want to hear those smooth, deceitful words that we're okay. We're just okay. and we're not okay.
That's right.
And so Sister Josie, because I don't want to just pick on the men, so Sister Josie, was there a state that the Lord wanted to show you the way out of?
Yes, I recall one night it was a season where I remember the Lord had Elder Miller to say to seek the Lord so he can show you where you're at in the Lord. And I remember him saying that, and I remember seeking the Lord and seeking the Lord and seeking the Lord, and it seemed like months went by, and I was just seeking the Lord to the point where I had kind of just stopped asking the Lord, because I figured, I was like, well, the Lord's just not going to show me where I'm at. I just got to keep doing what I'm doing,
Right.
and the Lord's just not going to show me where I'm at. And I remember one night, he actually had, I was actually asleep, but in sleep I had this like dream, and it was like so real. In the dream, it was like I seen the darkness, and it was like the darkest I've ever seen. It was like, it was beyond dark for me, and so, and then it was a coldness to this darkness, and I remember just feeling this darkness and experiencing this darkness, and then after a while, it was like I was in a cave, and in the cave, where there was no light at, there was this woman, and she was in mud, and she was just moving around in this mud, and I started to be able to see into that cave, and I could see all these men just reaching for her and just trying to get this woman that was in this mud. And then as the Lord took me closer, he was able to show me that that woman was me, that was deep in that mud with all the men that were like just reaching for her. And the Lord, he had showed me, and I kind of got to go back because before I was even able to experience that, the Lord had Elder Miller to teach so much about adultery. And that was the sin that I always would let just so easily beset me. That's the sin that I would just make any excuse for. And so the Lord, he had Elder Miller to keep teaching on it. And I remember fighting and wanting to be out and following the instructions that the Lord was giving Elder Miller so that I could come out. And so back to the vision that I was having, and at that time, those men, they were just like reaching and reaching and reaching, and I just was like, Lord, I don't ever want to live like that again. That is not me. I don't ever want to live like that. And I remember after crying out to the Lord, he was able to raise me up out of that mud, and I was dressed in all white, and I could see over to the side there was a light in that cave for me to come out, and that was the Lord bringing me out of that state. And I see it, and it wasn't that I was just like, oh, just instantly delivered. He was showing me you still have work to do, that you still have a way to go, but this is the way out. And so it encouraged me to continue to press, to come to the Church of Truth, to just immerse myself in everything that I could of the teaching so that I could continue to come out.
Amen. I thank the Lord for how you are really sharing your life experiences, because many times we think life is, just this natural body. I know that's the way that I felt, and I too have experienced that cave experience where I'm in this dark cave, and all I could see was this little beady eye.
Hey.
Ooh, Jesus. And how it, and I, in my experience, I didn't cry. I didn't cry out. And I just thank the Lord how he shows us where we're at. And you mentioned about this brightness of life, and I think Sister Desiree talked about the waterfalls. And so, Sister Sierra, have you experienced waterfalls in your life experiences?
Amen.
Yes, the Lord has shown me waterfalls several times, especially when Elder Miller prays for me. it's like, as Brother said, this beautiful place that, I think no movie can ever really demonstrate what the Lord shows you in the spirit because of the light that is shown. But I arose in the meadow and just like I remember the flowers being alive. It's like they were dancing, and I remember the waterfall. I'm thinking of one in particular of just being abundant and having it to that it was just flowing on me, and just the life that I was feeling, just the renewal that I was feeling, and I know I needed that at that time for sure, of just the state that of the doubt and the worries that I was in at the time, and I'm kind of thinking it was a time where I was taking to the meadow of the children, and I think it was the vision of when I came out, I saw, I think it was you, Mother Jenny, and Isaac with the children teaching in the fields, and everyone was walking with me as we were walking to YouTube with the children, but of just the guide that the Lord uses other than for in my vision. That I'm even thinking of one particular of me being in this house and thinking that I'm in this beautiful house, but everything was turning to different things. It's kind of like I think Brother Marcus was sharing that, it was a disarray, even though I thought it was beautiful, but really the house was a wreck. And the Lord had to use Eleanor to show me that. And then I remember pictures being up on the wall and of myself, but it was ugly, it was just ugly pictures. But of that time of the Lord using again Eleanor Miller to show me that state of that house.
Yes.
Thank you, Lord.
And it's just continuing that of myself. I don't know. I think things are beautiful, but really it's of the old man. I have to be shown that that's not what the Lord wants for me, and that beauty is going to be defined differently to the Lord.
Yes.
And, so yes, that's what the Lord's going to do.
Amen. The beauty of this is that all of it is scripture sound.
Yes.
You can look into Ephesians 4 when it's talking about that old man, how it's deceitful, how our understanding is darkened. And so the Lord has to use a servant to instruct us and to teach us and be so repetitive. So repetitive so that our spirit can be open, because before that our spirit is closed. And what the Lord is bringing to me is how he has shown one's Brother Miller in the spirit. So Sister Marja, can you share when the Lord showed you Brother Miller with other people of the Bible?
Amen.
Yes. I can remember it was, I was lying in my bed and I was fully awake, and I remember I was waiting for the baby shower of little Zeke because I had to fix some chicken salad. And I said, well, I have a few minutes, so I'm just going to lay here. And as I was laying there, I started to just see this vision come forth. And I remember the vision, we were all at the church, and we were like, all of us, the church members, we were praying. And as we were praying, well, you and Ella Miller were out in the spirit on the floor. And I remember when both of you were out in the spirit, and the Lord had me to go over to Elder Miller, and I remember he was telling me to pull, like I was starting to pull something out of his stomach, and it kind of looked like a grayish intestine thing, and I pulled it all the way out, and then when it all came out, I remember that the Lord had me to take my hand, and he said, now just kind of do like this, like over top of the stomach, and it was like a golden glow, and it was like healing, like his stomach. And then I remember like you were laying on your stomach, and the Lord told me to go over to you, and he was telling me to pull something out of your back, and I remember I kept trying to pull, and it wouldn't come.
Right.
And it was like Brother Brandon was sitting like right over here to the right of me on those pews, and I remember looking at him like, you see what's going on, come help me. In other words, I was saying to him, you see what's going on spiritually, come help me.
Right.
Yeah. And so Brother Brandon came over to me, and he started to help me to pull, and he was pulling, and it was like you would pull, and it'd be like a clump or something. It's like knotted, very knotted. We would pull, and right before we got to the end, I looked at Brother Isaac, and I was like, Isaac, run to the back to where the kitchen was and get a bowl full of water and salt and bring it back. So when Isaac came back with this tub bowl thing, I remember like when we got to the end, we pulled it out, and it was like this thing that was kind of snarling at us, trying to bite us.
Right.
And I hurried up and threw it into the bowl of salt water, and it kind of seized and just died. And then I remember the next episode, or the next, not episode, but the next thing that I remember seeing was, I remember I saw Brother Kevin, and I just saw an image of him, and then that was it. And then I remember seeing Brother Clyde, and when I saw him, he was standing like right here in that area, and it was like all these dark spirits all around him. And I remember I was like, I got fearful, and I said, I can't fight them. And at the time, it was like Archangel Michael was on the left of me, and the Lord was on the right of me. And the Lord was saying, yes, you can fight them, because we are here to fight with you. And so I remember like we started to fight, and as we were fighting, like it's hard to explain, because it was like I'm seeing things in the spirit and in the physical world at the same time. So I'm doing things in the physical world, even though I'm seeing everything that was going on in the spiritual. I can't quite explain how that was working. And then I remember like as we was fighting all those dark spirits, and then it was like I remember seeing Brother Clyde like just go out into the spirit. And then I remember it went back to you and Brother Miller, and I remember seeing both of y'all, and then y'all were kids, and y'all was sitting on the steps right here. You had little pigtails on, and y'all was holding hands, and y'all was just kind of swinging y'all feet like back and forth. And then and then the next thing I saw, I remember like kind of how we're all lined up right here. Well, everybody was standing, and it was like Abraham, Moses, the apostles, Swedenborg, and the Hardings, and Brother Elder Miller was right here too. But the Hardings was on the left side of Elder Miller. So he was like in between them and Swedenborg. And then I saw John, and he was kind of like where you are at, facing Elder Miller.
So you're talking about the Apostle John.
The Apostle John.
And then the Hardings were ones that I remember when I was introduced to them before. I was standing on the porch, we were getting ready to go in, and the Lord told me, I could just hear it audibly, that he said, you're getting ready to meet his family. That's what he said to me. And so they were the ones that were like the parents of Elder Miller, where spiritual parents were of this movement that the Lord was going to bring about. So this movement is going to be the crown jewel of all churches. And you know, it's really important to single that out to see who Elder Miller is and how he was able, the Lord used him to open up our spirits, where at one time our spirits were closed.
Amen.
Yes, Lord.
Amen. And then I remember John, the Apostle John, was saying to Elder Miller, out of all the prophets that the Lord has ever raised up, you are the most powerful one. And it was like when I was just looking at all of, like Abraham, Moses, the apostles, they were standing there with like this, it's hard for me to articulate, this proudness, this joy, this respect, but they was all standing in line not to break rank either.
Amen.
That's pretty much all that.
Amen. Can you repeat that last part? Out of
all the prophets that the Lord has ever raised up, he told Elder Miller that you are the most powerful one.
Amen.
Amen.
The Lord had to bring you to a point where you were able to experience that. And I know that there are ones here that have experienced seeing the Lord in Elder Miller. So, Isaac, have you experienced that?
Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Yes, I knew the Lord was going to have me to ask you. That when she said the most powerful one, it was like I just got taken back again.
Yeah.
The Lord showed me Elder Miller, and it was positioned where at first during the service he had showed me him as the king, and I know it was the Lord in him, but he was leaning on the pew. It was after a service where the Lord had moved so powerful and broken burdens off of ones, and people had come in, and ones had wept and cried and praised God. Ones were on the floor, and the Lord had a mighty move, and the Lord had Elder Miller standing there and just leaning against the pew, and it was like a fatigue on him, but it was like the power of the Lord on him, like the labor of the Lord on him. And he was wearing this deep red, soft, thick red garment that was just down, and the crown on his head was so gold. It was so pure and so thick, and the way that it just shaped his head, and he was just like leaning on the Lord, but I could see the Lord in him. And then it's like the clouds opened up, and I saw Brother Miller, and the way that he was moving through the clouds. He was in a chariot, but it was like he was one with the chariot. And he was just, his arm was just moving like this, just in like a circular pattern, just like I didn't know whether it was a hammer or whether it was just his arm, and he was just coming through and just like screaming through the sky in this chariot. And I could see like the caps of the wheels of the chariot and how they just shone and looked the power. I was just like thunderstruck, like I just had awe, and I knew that it was the power of the Lord, and he was showing me that he is omnipotent, and he goes where he wants to go, and he accomplishes what he wants to accomplish, and how he is mighty to save. And you know how we all, you know, have those moments in our life where we know that the Lord meets us just at that moment, just when we need him, because he's omnipresent, but he is able to reach us just where and he was showing me that the labor that Elder Miller has gone through to prepare himself as a servant, where he can come into him, where he can touch us in his servant. He can speak a secret of our heart that nobody else knows. We know it's just the Lord, and he just speaks it to our heart right in that moment when we're floundering, when we're crying out to the Lord. God is awesome.
Yes.
The Lord had that on my spirit when Sister Margie was talking about how the Apostle John was saying, you are the most powerful one. I just saw that in the clouds. I was like, oh my God.
It's really powerful because often hear, you know, from church members, oh, well, that was biblical times, like, you know, when the Lord walked the earth and you know, with Jeremiah and with all the prophets and stuff, that was then, but not that there is not a move of God like that anymore. Like that's just past, and everything is historical. And I remember, Brother Starks, so one of the things that the Lord had you to experience in your spirit, where you could just feel such fire that was coming from Brother Miller. And you had shared at one time how the Lord showed you his servant and how powerful his servant is. Would you like to share that?
Well, that honestly was in my spirit that the Lord was going to have me to ask me that. And truthfully, it's one of the ones where my spirit was opened up for the first time to see Elder Miller in the spirit and him being the Lord's servant. Now, I had left the church. I was away from the church probably for about almost a month. And in my spirit, I already knew who he was. And that was one reason why I was staying away from the church. It was my spirit was running from him. And so just like any old church, you know, if you've been away from the church and you come back, you know how ones greet you with, oh, he's got sin, or oh, let's stay away from him. But it wasn't like that when I came back here. I was embraced and loved. So that right there, it made me like really confirm, like, yes, this is what I'm supposed to be. So I remember I couldn't even approach him. I was going up the side to into the pulpit, but I couldn't get up to the side, and I fell at my knees right then and there. And it probably took me about 3 to 4 minutes to get the strength back, because all the strength had left me. And that was just by looking at him. All my strength had left me. And so when I had got risen, I had taken like 2 or 3 steps. I guess it was only 2. I had taken 2 steps. I had taken 2 steps up. And I remember Brother Marcus was standing there. I think Brother Brandon was up there. And I could not even open up my eyes to look at him, because the glory of the Lord was shining through him. And I remember in my spirit, I had no control over what I was saying. It was just coming out that you are the Lord's servant. And I just kept saying that. And in my mind, it's just like, I don't have any control over what I'm doing or what I'm saying. It just kept coming out. You are the Lord's servant. And then I just know every time I said it, it just kept getting, the glory just kept getting brighter and brighter and brighter, to where I had to shut my eyes, my physical eyes. I had to shut them just because of the presence that was coming from him. It was such a warmth. And you can tell that it was so true. And you can feel that it was love. It wasn't a hatred. And you could just feel like in my whole body, it was like I began to I was sweating just because of that warmth that was coming off of him. I started to sweat. Now, I remember, man, this is just kind of fast forward, there's so much stuff that happened that day, that I remember he was off to the side over here on the floor, and I was over here. And I still could not look at him at all, because that glory was just so bright that I felt like Paul, that I was blinded in my spirit, like I was just completely just blind. And I could just feel in the spirit that he was battling and that he was warring for me. Like I could feel it. And so I remember at one point I was laid out on the floor right here where Brother Brandon is, and I felt Brother Miller, he had went out in the spirit right before me. Well, he had eventually risen up, and in my spirit, in that old evil spirit, I couldn't rise up. I had to bow to him. I was bowing down to him. The Lord that was in him, I was bowing down to him. Then I'm thinking like, okay, Lord, like there's nothing left in me. I'm thinking that it was over with. You know, eventually I make my way to the normal seat that I sit at, and he just had walked past me and stopped and was praying again. The next thing you know, I'm standing on top of the pew, you know, and once again I had no control of what I was doing or what I was saying, but my spirit was saying that he lives every single word, every single jot and tittle that's in the word. He is living it. I don't know how you live a jot and a tittle, but he does. And then from there, and it was a couple of brothers that were holding me up. At one point, I remember, like, my spirit was like, and it's so evil, it was like, get out of here. Like, you have to get out of here. And I just took off running out the door. And I remember Brother Brandon, like, followed me out, and I just instantly just collapsed, fell out on the ground out there. And then eventually, once I got my strength again, I came through the door and he was standing there. And it was just like that glory. I couldn't even look at him. Like, so much stuff was like, I mean, tears was coming out, snot was coming out. And it was just like I fell to my knees and I bowed to him again. Like, you are the servant of the Lord, and there is no doubt that you are.
Amen.
You bow to the God that's in him. Because one thing that Brother Miller does is he said, it's not about me.
Yeah.
I mean, if he says anything, he says it so repeatedly that it is not about me. And another thing that he says, I want y'all to get where I'm at in the Lord, and how he wars in the spirit, how he wars in the spirit for each and every one of us. And I know Sister Francis, the first time that you came to the Church of Truth, you was in a war zone because you wanted to know who this Brother Miller was, and because your daughter had came here before, and so and how the Lord started moving on you, whereas you were thirsting after the righteousness. And you would leave, and I mean, services would be over with. You would go home, and then you would call 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. Where y'all at? Y'all still at the church? I'm on my way. And you would come all the way back because of thirsting after that presence. So, would you like to share with us how the Lord has blessed you on your job, where the servant of God warred for you and you were able to experience the presence on your job?
Amen.
Oh, yes. This just happened here recently. And I had came to talk to you about some of the things that I was going through on the inside. And I didn't want to experience that. I didn't want to feel like that anymore. It was hatred. I was like, oh my God, this is all, I could see what it was. And when I talked to you about it, you would explain to me that I had to go deep within. The more sin that I lay aside, the more that God can bless me to get rid of.
Right.
And so when I went home, I started to get into the Word because we was instructed to go into True Christianity 117. So I started to get into it, and all of a sudden, God's presence came, and I was like, oh, wow. And then he just started to open it up to where I could understand. And I believe it was Wednesday when Brother Miller was speaking about how, no, this was yesterday, the Bible study, he was speaking about how you don't go to bed, like Brother Marcus had posted up on proof, like you don't go to bed, with whatever you going to bed with is what you're going to come up with in the morning.
Right.
And so he was explaining to us about, letting the Lord be that.
And that's what Brother Miller has said on Friday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I had already, I was like, oh my God, that's what I did, and I didn't even know.
Right.
At the time. I was like, oh, that word was so good yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, it's hitting me right on the spot of where I'm at.
Right.
And so I had got up that morning, I got back into work, it started to be alive to me. It started to when it was opening up, it was like, this is it,
Right.
And then I started to hunger for more. And so that morning I woke up, I got back into the Word, and I said, oh, that's right. Because I know that before we do anything, we are supposed to pray. And I've learned that here anytime, So I was like, started praying as the Lord to come in, open the Word up to me before I could get understanding, not only understanding of it, but to live.
Right.
And I started to pray her and here at the church. And I tell you, that presence came so strong on me, y'all. And I was like, oh my God. It's just so amazing how you can just experience God, here. because I never have experienced him before.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, y'all, I'm telling you, that's why when I posted up on Cruise that it was my birthday, because the Lord's Spirit lived in me, and I meant that. That was exactly what had happened to me. And then I feel the Lord's presence. I feel the Lord's presence strongly, And every time when, we hug you, our brother Miller, we feel in the presence. Every time we come here, the presence is here. When I'm on my job and the broadcast is on, the presence comes up on my job. And I'm dead serious about that. When I'm driving in my car, I got to pull over to the side because when the broadcast is on, the presence comes, And I'm just experiencing all of this. And then I never experienced the presence living on the inside of me. And when that happened to me, I was just like I was just in my own little zone. I was living, I was like, that's what they talking about. That's what Brother Billy talking about. The word has to live on the inside. The presence, God has to live on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just overwhelmed, overwhelmed, and I was like, Lord, thank you, and then all day long I had my little earphones in my ear, y'all, and I'm doing my work, and I'm just, oh man, it was just an awesome experience, and just to experience God, that's just one of the most amazing things that can happen to a human being on earth, when you really get to meet your Creator, who created you, and the purpose of you being here.
Come on.
You're not here to live in sin. You're here to we wasn't, here to live in sin. And I thought that, we're gonna live in sin here on earth, and then we get to heaven, that's when we're gonna experience God. But I learned that's not so. We're gonna experience God right here, right where you at.
Yeah.
And I've learned that ever since I've been here, I've experienced God. Ever since I've been here, I've been through the battles, I had to fight.
Yeah.
And I remember when you said, Mother Jenny, that the fight is good. And I didn't even know, I was like, we don't feel like it's good. But I've learned that the fight is good, and the more you fight for it, the more it comes.
Oh, that's the truth.
And I thank God for that.
Amen. How you have to fight. And I was a person in my life, I didn't want to fight for nothing. I always wanted to find another way, another angle. Maybe I could talk my way out of this or talk my way out of that, even if I had to lie. But I did not want to physically fight. So it was hard for me to fight the way inwardly. I had to, it was brand new for me to fight inwardly. Now, I'm not going to say that I was a saint, because I was not a saint. I mean, I went down a dry devil, came up a wet devil, so water baptism didn't save me. But Brother Miller had to teach me how to fight. How to fight. And that was so hard for me, but when you get it, grab on to it.
Yes, you do.
You really don't want to let it go. And sometimes we let it go, but then the Lord will show us you're getting away. He'll use the servant to say, you're getting away. And then he'll use his servant to rebuke, but then how to bring you back into the fold. And so, have you experienced that, Sister Nina?
Oh, definitely. Yes, I have experienced that. And I was thinking about a time where I thought I was grown, and I thought that, after a while coming to the Church of Truth, that I got it down pat and I was ready to do things on my own. And I remember it was a time I was living in an apartment by myself, and it was my first time experiencing what that old man was, and how I had to fight, even though I wasn't fighting physically, but the Lord had showed me. And so I was away from the church for about a week or so, because I thought I could do everything on my own. And so the Lord gave me a dream while I was laying in my bed. It was late at night, and I was in a dream, and I heard something at the back door. And I was like, what is this at the back door? And it kind of frightened me in my dream, and I was like, what's going on? So I got up and I crept into the back, where the back door was. but the back door was like the kitchen. And so I'm looking, and when I came into where the kitchen was, there was this preacher. It was a woman, and she was blue, and she had like wild hair.
And this is happening in your spirit.
In my spirit, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And she had these teeth, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and she started coming towards me, and I'm like, what is going on here? And so I started backing up a bit. I'm like, what is she trying to do? Like, and then so she kept coming towards me. And so I was like, I'm about to have to fight this lady. And I was like, what are you doing here? Like, I kept trying to talk to her, but the more I talked to her, the more she just growled. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I was so scared because I didn't know what was going on. And so we began to fight, and she was getting me. She was. And I was like, oh no. And I started to fight back. And after a while, it seemed like it went on for forever. But after a while, I was able to conquer her, and she went out back through the kitchen and out the back door. And I was terrified. After I woke up, I was like, oh my God. And so I called Elder Miller, and I was telling him about it, what was going on, and he was able to enlighten me of what was going on in my spirit. He was letting me know that was my old man. And I got mad because I was like, that ain't me. But after a while, I was able to see that was me. That was the state that my spirit was in. And that I had to, like, there was no other option. It's either you're going to get overtaken or you're going to fight back.
That's it.
Amen.
And he was saying that the way that she entered, she came in from the back and through the kitchen, representing that's where you eat at. Pertaining to the word, that's where you eat at. So it's not supposed to be in a disarray. You're supposed to be learning the truth. You're supposed to be living the truth. And it made so much sense to me. And I was like, Lord, what am I doing to myself? It was like that first wake-up call, like, this is serious. Like, all this time that I've been trying to fight something on the outside, there it is inside of me. My own worst enemy is myself. And so I have to take this serious. And so I was seeking instructions because I didn't want to experience that anymore. Because like he was saying that, being afraid of confrontation and not wanting to fight, that was me as well. I don't want to be a part of any confrontation. And now learning that it's a spiritual battle, I know now that I have some weapons, I have some tools that I can use to fight that old man. But I would have never known that if I hadn't had somebody that went before me that can show me what I need to do. So, yes, I can relate to what you're saying of having to not be afraid of that confrontation, but face it dead on, because that is what's keeping me from the Lord. And so I just thank the Lord, and He's continuing to show me my old man so that I can go deeper, so that I can remove everything that's not like the Lord.
Amen. That's really awesome because that old man, it came to the point I said, oh, it's just old. And we get complacent sometimes unless you have a service. No, you need to take this serious. Just like, people say, well, there's a body of Christ. There's a body of sin. As a community. And that community is fighting you from getting into heaven. And in this old man, it has a religion of its own that it wants to teach you, it wants to instruct you, and it wants to keep you under it. It wants to keep God under it. It wants to conquer the God in you. It does not want you to make heaven. It wants you to make hell. And have you experienced this, Sister Mary?
Amen. The Lord has blessed me since I've been here to be shown different states of my old man, different places where I'm at. The Lord's opened up and used His servant in the Spirit to show me what's going on with me. I know one of the always comes to mind is a time that I found myself sitting in a very dark room. I didn't know, I couldn't see anything. I knew where I was, and it was, I was scared because I didn't know what was there with me. I didn't know where to go or who to ask for help, and so in the dream, Elder Miller walked in, and there was light coming from him. He wasn't carrying a flashlight or a lamp or something or a light switch. There was light emanating from him, and that lit the room. And then when I saw the room, I felt even more scared because it was awful. It was like a broken house with jagged pieces of wood and rotten things, and I was like, oh, what am I doing here? I kind of wanted the light to turn off because it was better when I didn't know. But no, it was good because then the light was there, and so then I started to feel overwhelmed. Like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do?
Come on, man.
And then Elder Miller, he picked up his big piece of wood with nails in it and he said, come on, we gotta get this out of here. It's not safe. And he just picked it up and carried it out of the room. And he wanted me to help, like get up and start cleaning this room. And it was really powerful to be given that opportunity because no one in my whole life ever helped me to see my real state of where I was really at. And there have just been time and time again that the Lord's just little by little opened my spirit. And I know there's still a lot more I have to see and understand about what's going on in me. Another time, I know the Lord showed me the gates of hell. And they were scary gates. Like they were these like rickety wooden, they were on wheels, and it would like roll open and it would creak, and then as the sun was setting it would roll closed, and he showed me choosing to go behind that gate as the sun set. Because in that vision he showed myself and Ron, and we were going to be getting married, and he showed there was another couple in our marriage. And we were interacting with this other couple as part of our marriage, and I couldn't figure out why there was this. They were nasty other couple that they were part of our marriage. And at night, sometimes I would choose to go behind the gate with the bad version of Ron, and in this dark, nasty. There were rats and this creaking thing, and you had to rush because it's a sunset. If you didn't go behind it, you wouldn't be able to get behind it. And I asked Elder Miller after I'd seen that, what was that? And he said, well, that was the gates of hell, and the Lord was showing you the relationship that you have with Ron's old man and he has with your old man, and that's not the marriage that the Lord wants you to have. And then you have to conquer that because you want to have a marriage unto the Lord. But you can get caught up in a marriage, an awful marriage between your two old men. And so it's just been a blessing. I wouldn't have understood the dream. I would have thought like, oh my gosh, do we have adultery in our, like what is going on? But that's the awesome part is we have a servant. So when we have these visions and dreams, we don't have to sit with them and be confused or try to make something up about what was that. And even just last night, the Lord showed me a skeleton, and it was a blessing because I was asking the Lord to keep me in Him throughout the night and to be grateful and focused on Him. And I saw the skeleton and I was like, oh no. And then I remembered, no, when the Lord shows you that, it's a blessing, right? Because He's showing you it's something that you can conquer.
That is awesome because many times I know in the old teaching, you get married, you say I do, you may get to spend some time with your spouse, for a couple of days, or maybe you go on a mini vacation or whatever have you, but then there's no instructions. You're just like, okay, I'm gonna please you, and I hope you please me, and That's it. And there's no instructions on how the marriage towards the Lord and towards one another is even taught. But how the Lord, when he's raising up a church, when he's raising up the Lord doing this, he prepares himself a vessel that will be able to instruct by the life that they live on how to achieve the end in view. The commandments of God is the best kept secret. And I did not know anything about this secret, this holy place that the Lord wanted me to achieve. And the only way that our spirits can be opened up is by the commandments of God. You can't even experience the Lord the way that he wants you to experience. Amen. And it says in 1 John 2 and 3, hereby we do know that we know him if we keep his commandments. But if you don't have someone to show you how to have that relationship, how the commandments are supposed to come alive in you, and that's your worship. When you're living the commandments of God, that's your worship. And so we know that if you have turned in to this video, that it is a divine appointment because the Lord wants to take you on a journey to your salvation. If you're in the need of prayer, we are 24 hours. We don't believe in making appointments, We believe in going to war against sin. Because that's the way that we have been taught by the servant of the Most High God, Jesus Christ. And so we thank you for tuning in and being with us, and the best is yet to come. God bless. One more thing, if you would like to get in contact with us, you can reach us at 502-408-8836. Our church is, again, the Church of Truth, 1302 Cypress Street, Louisville, Kentucky. And we want you to experience the living God. Stay tuned for our radio broadcast information.